بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ازيكم يا ولاد؟ يا رب تكونوا كلكم بخير ان شاء الله. المحاضرة دي this is the second lecture in suppositories. In the last lecture we talk about different types and shapes of suppositories, advantages and disadvantages, physiological factors affecting drug absorption from rectal suppositories. اتكلمنا على ال uses of suppositories والcomposition والproperties of suppository bases. ودخلنا آخر نقطة اتكلمنا عليها كان ال types of suppository bases. اتكلمنا في ال types of suppository bases على إن هما 3 types. ال first type is fatty base, example منها الكاكاو butter, hydrophilic base, water أو water soluble base زي الجيلاتو جليسرين أو الجليسروجيلاتين, والwater miscible base. We talked about the properties of fatty base, the ideal properties of fatty bases. البروبرتيز دي كانت الايودين فاليو, السابونيفيكيشن فاليو, الاسيد فاليو, الهيدروكسيل نمبر. اتكلمنا كمان على السوليديفيكيشن بوينت وعلى الميلتنج رينج. For ideal values for these properties, for example for acid value it should be below 0.2, saponification value ranges from 200 to 245, iodine value should be less than 7. example من الفاتي بيزز دول أشهر 2 examples. أول واحد كان الكاكاو باتر بنسميه ثايوبروما أويل, وفي كلاس اسمه السيمي سينثيتيك جليسرايد. This picture shows you the shape of cacao butter plant. Cacao butter plant, this part of the orange part of the plant, which is the fruit of the plant, is fermented under certain conditions. After that, cacao butter will be formed inside this fruit and used as base for suppository. So the cacao butter is of plant origin. It's not from petroleum or synthetic origin. It is of plant origin. This is the shape of theobroma oil or cacao butter. It's like its appearance is like the butter. It is of natural origin, as we said before. Its melting point ranged from 30 to 36. It is semi-solid or solid in nature. It's yellow in color. It is composed of 3 types of ester, of glyceryl esters. Glyceryl ester of stearic acid, glyceryl ester of palmitic acid, and glyceryl ester of oleic acid. Oleic acid is a center of unsaturation, and this resulted in instability or polymorphism change in cacao butter or theobroma oil. Since its melting point is very low, it's near to the melting point of the body temperature, so it's not suitable to be used as suppository base in tropical countries in which the temperature exceeds 50 degrees Celsius. Currently, theobroma oil or cacao butter is not used in formulation of suppository since it has several disadvantages. The most important one is it suffers from polymorphism. It has different 4 forms of crystalline structure due to presence of high percentage of triglycerides in cacao butter composition. The first crystalline form is called beta crystals, and it has melting point between 34 and 36 degrees centigrade. Beta dash crystals of melting point 27, alpha crystals of melting point 22, gamma crystals of melting point 18. The second disadvantage that it needs a lubrication process during manufacture, so you cannot use cacao butter without lubrication of the mold since it sticks to the wall of the mold. This picture shows you the shape of theobroma oil suppository after preparation and solidification in refrigerator, and the left-sided one is not solidified theobroma oil since it suffers from polymorphism, and the crystalline structure is changed, and it has lower solidification point, lower than the room temperature, so it will be in the liquid state and cannot be solidified due to polymorphic change. Sometimes when we add some additives like volatile oils, chloral hydrate, methyl paraben, phenol, and camphor, these additives lower the melting point of cacao butter. So in this case, we have to add some solidifying agent to counteract the softening or the lowering in melting point of cacao butter. Solidifying agent like cetyl ester wax, it can be added in 20%. Or add beeswax as 4%. This may be melted with cacao butter, the solidifying agent, melted with cacao butter to compensate for softening effect of the added substances. This slide shows you other fatty bases other than cacao butter. The first one is wetipsol base. Wetipsol is triglycerides of saturated acids. The second one is Wecobi base. It's triglyceride derived from coconut oil. And the third one is fatty base, F-A-T-T-I, fatty base. It's triglycerides from palm oil, coconut oil, and self-emulsifying glyceryl monostearate and polyoxystearate. These are three examples of fatty bases other than cacao butter. Wetipsol is usually symboled as W hyphen H15 or H25 or H55. The advantages of these fatty bases that they not suffer from polymorphism. They can tolerate oxidation, and since they have no unsaturation center like cacao butter, and they rapidly solidify. The second type of suppository bases is gelatoglycerine or glycerogelatin base. We have two different compositions for gelatoglycerine. The first one is stated in the USP pharmacopoeia. The composition of gelatoglycerine in USP is 70% glycerol, 20% gelatin, and 10% water. In British pharmacopoeia, BP, it composed of 70% glycerin, 14% gelatin, and 16% water. As you see, the percentage of water in the British pharmacopoeia formulation is higher than USB, and we'll talk about this point later on. Also, we have two types of gelatin. Gelatin A, used for acidic drugs, which is cationic drugs, and gelatin B for alkaline drugs. The composition of urethral suppositories is different from rectal suppositories. It consists of 20% glycerol, 60% gelatin, and 20% medicated aqueous portion. When urethral suppositories formed from cacao butter suppository, it will be brittle and rapidly and suffers from rapid softening. This slide shows you the properties of gelatoglycerine suppository base. Gelatoglycerine has laxative properties, and usually we use it in the home for patients who suffers from constipation. It has laxative properties by the effect of osmotic pressure. It can absorb fluid from surrounding area. So this water or this fluid will exert osmotic effect on the site of administration, causing laxative properties. It also hygroscopic in nature. Hygroscopic in nature means that it can absorb water from surrounding, from the air, from the tissues. So it can absorb a large amount of water. So it is hygroscopic in nature. And during preparation, we have to avoid overheating, since overheating of this base release toxic volatile material. Actually, overheating of glycerol, which is one composition of this base, when overheated, release toxic volatile material. So we have to avoid overheating. Consequently, we have to store the suppositories in a certain condition to avoid absorption of water. So it should be kept in well-closed container in a cool place, since they will absorb and dissolve in atmospheric moisture. To avoid this problem, these suppositories should be stored in well-closed container in a cool place. Another disadvantage for gelato-glycerine suppositories that they may have a dehydrating effect and may be irritating to the tissues upon insertion. So the water present in the formulation of suppository minimize this action. As I told you before, the British pharmacopoeial formula contains a large amount of water than the USB one, so it will be less irritating than the USB formula. The suppository may be moistened with water prior to insertion to reduce tendency for the base to draw water from the mucus. يعني احنا دايما بننصح المريض قبل ما يعمل insertion للسبوزيتري يحط السبوزيتري يدبها كده في شوية مية علشان الجيلاتوجليسرين يسحب كمية المية اللي ممكن يسحبها من التيشوز حواليه، فنقلل كمية الاريتيشن. لما بيسحب مية من التيشوز بيعمل نوع من الاريتيشن. The nature of gelatoglycerine suppository is aqueous in nature. It's not fatty. It's aqueous in nature. So it's liable for bacterial or fungal contamination. So to extend the shelf life of these suppositories, you should add some preservative to avoid contamination, such as methyl paraben or propyl paraben. And as I said before, to facilitate the administration of glycerinated gelatin suppository should be dipped in water just before use. The third example of suppository bases or third type is water miscible base. Example of water miscible base is polyethylene glycol. It is a synthetic material. PEG 400, PEG 1500, PEG 400. We usually add certain number after the symbol PEG. This number expresses the molecular weight of the polymer. So the PEG 400 is of less molecular weight than PEG 1500, and this is of lower molecular weight than PEG 4000. The advantage of PEG as a base for suppositories, the melting point increases with increase in molecular weight. PEG is slowly melt and slowly release the drug. They dissolve in body fluid rather than melting, since they are not fatty base. They will not melt in the body temperature, but they will dissolve in the body fluid. They are not sticky. ده مش زي الجيلاتوجليسرين. Gelatoglycerin is sticky, but BEG is not sticky in nature. BEG has high viscosity, and we can control the viscosity by changing the ratios of different BEG's molecular weight used in the preparation of suppository. The disadvantages of BEG as a suppository base that they are incompatible with bismuth salt or phenol, so we cannot add any bismuth salt or phenolic compound in the suppository formulation in which the BEG is the base of suppository. They can dissolve some plastic component. You may observe that some strips of suppository which is wrapped in plastic sheets, the plastic sheets may have with time like small pores due to the effect of PEG wrapped in this plastic. نلاقيه داب شوية أو اتخرم شوية. ليه؟ لأن البلاستيك أكل جزء من الPEG أكل جزء من البلاستيك اللي هو wrapped فيه. كمان ال PEG can reduce antimicrobial activity of some preservative added. Sometimes we add some preservative to the suppository to avoid bacterial contamination, and these preservatives may be incompatible with PEG, and they lost their antimicrobial activity due to interaction with PEG. PEG suppositories that do not contain at least 20% water should be dipped in water just before use, as I said before, to avoid irritation of mucous membrane. This procedure prevents moisture being drawn from the tissue after insertion and stinging sensation or irritation sensation. بتavoid الirritation sensation اللي بيحصل نتيجة لأن البي جي برضو كان absorb water من surrounding tissues، فبيعمل نوع من irritation أو stinging sensation، فده can be avoided by dipping the suppository in water just before application. We talked about the main three types of suppository bases, which is fatty base, gelatoglycerin, and water miscible base. Now I'm going to show you some types of miscellaneous bases. The first one is chemical or physical mixture of oleaginous base with water soluble or water miscible base. The second one is the emulsion base. It's generally water in oil emulsion. The external phase is oil. It is prepared by mixing cacao butter with emulsifying agent. The emulsifying agent will allow the cacao butter to incorporate amount of water, forming water in oil emulsion. The third type of miscellaneous base is a soap, may be used as a base, and there is an official preparation in the USP composed of mixture of gelatoglycerin suppository with soap as a base for suppository.